Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. So one of the GeneratePress support topics that comes up a lot is how to use Adobe Fonts on your website. Now, Adobe Fonts used to be called Typekit, so if you've seen that topic floating around, it's the same thing. Now, if you have a Adobe subscription and you want to use the fonts, you could grab them at fonts.adobe.com. And it's actually a lot easier now than it used to be. I had a video on YouTube showing how to add Typekit fonts the old way, which I deleted because it was no longer relevant. And this video is kind of the way moving forward on how to do it. Now, one kind of note is if you want to serve your fonts locally, you can't actually do this through Adobe Fonts. That's because just due to licensing, they don't allow you to download the fonts. You have to link back to their CSS and pretty much the same way that Google Fonts loads if you're not serving those locally. So if that's a deal breaker, I guess the alternative is to, if you find a font here you want to use, to purchase them from the Font Foundry, and then you can go ahead and add those font files to your web host and serve them locally. But if you just want to link back and use these fonts on your site, it's actually really easy. So when you first log in, if you want to actually kind of browse through fonts, you can go to all fonts and choose by tag or classification like serif, sans serif, stuff like that. If you know what font you want, you could just search for it. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the font Europa because it's a font that's not available on Google. And if I wanted to use that on my site, this would probably be the best place to go ahead and grab it. So let me first just type Europa. Now there's two kind of areas as far as Adobe Fonts. There is going to be your web projects, which is what I'm going to do to add these fonts to my website. And then there's also going to be your just activated fonts. So let me jump over there really quick. When I go to Manage Fonts, all my active fonts, which are toggled here, are fonts that I want to be able to use in all of the Adobe programs. So I do a lot of print work. So all of these fonts that are toggled will actually show up in InDesign so I can use them. Now these are kind of separate from your web projects. When I go to, and let me just make one note, if you see this little download icon here, this doesn't mean download the font because you can't, like I said, legally you can't download fonts from here. This would be to use these fonts in a non-Adobe program. So if you were using Microsoft Word and you wanted Oxygen to show up in there, the fact that I actually already did it, the clouds are kind of gone. That means if I open Word, I can select these 4 weights of Oxygen and use them. So active fonts aside, what I want to focus on is a web project. So I'm going to click that. And the way these works is you choose the weights or styles you want. It creates a link to the style sheet here. And then I'm going to hook this link into GeneratePress in the header. And then I'll be able to actually go into the typography settings and use the weights that I have activated here. So let me go back to Europa. Whoop. Now these are going to be for activating them to use, like I said, in maybe InDesign or Illustrator. So I'm just going to leave these off because I don't plan on using these in any of the Adobe programs. I just need them for my website. So I'm going to go and I'm going to click Add to Web Project. And then what I'm going to do is I'm only going to toggle the weights that I actually want to use on my website. So that would be 300, 400, and 700. And you can always come back and change these. So if you built your site and you realize that you didn't use light, you could come back here and uncheck it, and then it'll just refresh your style sheet, and then light will no longer be loading on your website. Next thing I need to do is I need to give it a name. So I'm just going to call it the name of the font, which is what I usually do, because you can use these on multiple sites. So if you name this maybe the client's name, that might be kind of confusing if you wanted to use the exact same style sheet on maybe another client's website. So I usually just name it the name of the font. All right, so here's the fonts that were added. And then here's the link that I need to copy. So I'm going to copy that and just put it here. And kind of a little clipboard just to hold on to, because I'm going to need that to paste into GeneratePress. And I'm going to click done. All right, so now I have my web project. So let's say I went home and went back to manage fonts and then went back to my web projects. You'll see here now I have Europa. And if I wanted to edit it, I could. So let me go and show you really quick. If I grab this CSS link right here and drop it into a browser, this is showing what Adobe is going to load on my website, 700, 300, and 400. So if I went back and unchecked light and came back here and refreshed this one would actually be removed. Same thing if I wanted to, as of right now, all these fonts are set to auto. So if I went and changed them to swap, I could click save. And now when I go back here, give it a little refresh and auto right here, maybe one more time. There it goes. It just changed to swap. So this is all kind of dynamic as well, where any changes you make at Adobe's end, it's going to change your style sheet. All right, so let me go back to GeneratePress. So I'm going to need to grab this full link that Adobe gave me, and I'm going to go into Appearance, Elements, and I'm going to create a new element, and it's going to be a hook. And I'll just call this Europa as well. And then I'm going to paste that link in here. And then I'm going to leave it as WP head because that's where I want it to go. And you don't have to worry about toggling any of this. For display rules, I'm going to choose entire site because I want it to load on every page of my website. And I'm going to click publish. All right, so now on this demo site, I have Europa loading, and I just need to basically define it in the typography settings. So let me go to the customizer and click typography. And I'm going to click add font. Now you're not going to do a search because it's not going to show up. You need to actually type the name in here, and you need to type it exactly how you're going to see it on the style sheet. It's not case sensitive, so if you typed a capital E, it'll still work, but I usually just type it exactly how I see it here. So I'm going to put Europa. And I definitely don't want the Google Fonts API toggled because I'm not using any Google Fonts. All right, now, so even though I typed this and nothing really happened, it's loading. It's there. I just need to kind of define it now in the manager. Now, you'll notice that the weights that usually you can select, those are going to be in here instead. And it's going to list all the weights, 100, 200, 300. But you're only going to actually be able to select the ones that you activated at Adobe for them to work. So if you had a whole bunch, you basically maybe make note of the weights that are available. So I know I have 700, 300, and 400. So I'm going to go to the manager. And the first font you want to add is your body. The body kind of acts as your global font. If you don't assign any other font settings a different font, because your body font basically gets inherited across the board. And that's actually a good thing. And I'll show you why. So here's my body font. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select Europa. And you'll notice all my fonts, my page title, my navigation, my H2, and my paragraph is now all the font Europa. So I could go in here, and the font weight is default, but if you wanted to just make it the same as the style sheet, default is 400, or you could choose normal. And then I'm going to maybe make it a little bigger, like that. You could do your tablet and mobile settings, make them different sizes. Now, as of right now, the body font Europa is going to be everywhere. Every typography setting on my site will use it, unless I go and kind of change it using another font setting. So here's my H2. I want to make my H2 bold. So by doing that, I could go in, and if I wanted all my H tags to be bold, I could choose all headings. But I usually just target them individually because I want to be able to change the sizes for different devices for each one. Now the font family, this is where the inherit is kind of a good option to use. I could choose Europa, but by choosing inherit across the board, so if I set 10 more font settings and I set them all to inherit, if I decided to change the font down the road, if I change the body font, I wouldn't have to change all the others because they're all set to inherit. But if I did go and make this, set them all to Europa, I would have to go back and change each one individually. So inherit's a great option if you're not sure of the font. Maybe you're thinking about using a font or you want to try another one. I would set everything to inherit. Now, as far as the weight, I can go into H2 and I know that I have 700 available, so I'll choose that. And click publish. And you can go through and basically keep adding your typography as you like. Now, the fact that I use 400 for body and 700 for the heading, if I was done and the client approved the site, then I could go back and I could say, you know what, I don't need 300. I'm not using it on the site, so there's no point in loading it. So I could untoggle that, click save. And if I go back here just to double check, you'll notice that 300 was just removed. And now because it was removed here, this link is in my on my site, hooked into the head. So now basically 300 is no longer loading on my site. So I'm only loading 400 and 700. So that's how easy it is. You don't need the old PHP snippet that was required on the previous version. You just have to basically make sure you add the font name, exactly how it's spelt on the style sheet. Don't toggle Google. Set your body font. And then anything else you want to, set it to inherit. And that's how it works. It's a lot easier. And I think the thing that tripped up a lot of people was when you put the a lot of people were looking for it in the drop-down menu and didn't realize you just have to actually put the name here. Because nothing really happens when you put the name here, so it almost seems like something should happen, but it doesn't. But as long as the name matches your style sheet, you should be good to go. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them below. So here's my front end. This is the system UI font. And now if I refresh, I've got Europa everywhere. So if I use my little Chrome what font extension, I can go in and Europa 700, Europa 400, and I could double check everything if I wanted to. All right, so I hope everyone's doing great. I hope your year has started off well. And again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help, and I'll see you soon.